Section 27 of English Synonyms and Antonyms. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by James O'Connor. English Synonyms and Antonyms by James Champlin Fernald. Eternal to exterminate. Eternal. Synonyms: deathless, endless, aeonian, everlasting, ever-living, fadeless, immortal, imperishable, interminable, never-ending, never-failing, perennial, perpetual, timeless, unceasing, undying, unending, unfading, unfailing, without end. Eternal strictly signifies without beginning or end, in which sense it applies to God alone. Everlasting applies to that which may or may not have beginning, but will never cease. Eternal is also used in this more limited sense. Endless, without end, in its utmost reach, is not distinguishable from everlasting, but endless is constantly used in inferior senses, especially in mechanics, as in the phrases an endless screw, an endless chain. Everlasting and endless are both used in a limited sense of protracted, indefinite, but not infinite duration, as the everlasting hills, endless debates. So we speak of interminable quarrels. Eternal holds quite strictly to the vast and sacred meaning in which it is applied to the divine being and the future state. Everlasting, endless, and eternal may be applied to that which has no life, as everlasting chains, endless night, eternal death. Immortal applies to that which now has life and is forever exempt from death. Timeless carries perhaps the fullest idea of eternal, as above and beyond time, and not to be measured by it. Event. Synonyms: case, chance, circumstance, consequence, contingency, end, episode, fact, fortune, incident, issue, occurrence, outcome, possibility, result, sequel. Etymologically, the incident is that which falls in, the event that which comes out. Event is thus greater and more signal than incident. We speak of trifling incidents, great events, incidents of daily life, events of history. Circumstance agrees with incidents in denoting a matter of relatively slight importance, but implies a more direct connection with the principal matter. Circumstantial evidence is evidence from seemingly minor matters directly connected with a case. Incidental evidence would be some evidence that happened unexpectedly to touch it. An occurrence is etymologically that which we run against, without thought of its origin, connection, or tendency. An episode is connected with the main course of events, like an incident or circumstance, but is of more independent interest and importance. Outcome is the Saxon, and event the Latin, for expressing the same original idea. Consequence or result would express more of logical connection and be more comprehensive. The end may be simple cessation. The event is what has been accomplished. The event of a war is victory or defeat. The end of the war is reached when a treaty of peace is signed. Since the future is contingent, event comes to have the meaning of a contingency, as in the event of his death the policy will at once fall due. Compare circumstance, consequence, end. every. Synonyms: all, any, both, each, either. All and both are collective; any, each, and every are distributive. Any makes no selection and may not reach to the full limits of all; each and every make no exception or omission, and must extend to all. All sweeps in the units as part of a total; each and every proceed through the units to the total. A promise made to all omits none; a promise made to any may not reach all. A promise made to every one is so made that no individual shall fail to be aware of it. A promise made to each is made to the individuals personally, one by one. Each is thus more individual and specific than every. Every classifies, each individualizes. Each divides, both unites. If a certain sum is given to each of two persons, both, together, must receive twice the amount. Both must be aware of what has been separately communicated to each. A man may fire both barrels of a gun by a single movement; if he fires each barrel, he discharges them separately. Either properly denotes one of two, indefinitely to the exclusion of the other. The use of either in the sense of each or both, though sustained by good authority, is objectionable because ambiguous. "His friends sat on either side of the room" would naturally mean on one side or the other; if the meaning is on both sides, it would be better to say so. EVIDENT. Synonyms: apparent, clear, conspicuous, discernible, distinct, glaring, indubitable, manifest, obvious, open, overt, palpable, patent, perceptible, plain, tangible, transparent, unmistakable, visible. That is apparent which clearly appears to the senses or to the mind as soon as the attention is directed toward it; that is evident of which the mind is made sure by some inference that supplements the facts of perception. The marks of a struggle were apparent in broken shrubbery and trampled ground, and the finding of a mutilated body and a rifled purse made it evident that robbery and murder had been committed. That is manifest which we can lay the hand upon. Manifest is thus stronger than evident, as touch is more absolute than sight. That the picture was a modern copy of an ancient work was evident, and on comparison with the original its inferiority was manifest. That is obvious which is directly in the way, so that it cannot be missed, as the application of the remark was obvious. Visible applies to all that can be perceived by the sense of sight, whether the noonday sun, a ship on the horizon, or a microscopic object. Discernible applies to that which is dimly or faintly visible, requiring strain and effort in order to be seen, as the ship was discernible through the mist. That is conspicuous which stands out so as necessarily or strikingly to attract the attention. Palpable and tangible express more emphatically the thought of manifest. Antonyms: concealed, covert, dark, hidden, impalpable, impenetrable, imperceptible, invisible, latent, obscure, occult, secret, undiscovered, unimagined, unknown, unseen, unthought of. Example: synonyms: archetype, ensample, exemplar, exemplification, ideal, model, pattern, precedent, prototype, sample, specimen, standard, type, warning. From its original sense of sample or specimen, from Latin exemplum. Example derives the seemingly contradictory meanings on the one hand of a pattern or model, and on the other hand of a warning. A sample or specimen of what is to be followed or of what is to be shunned. An example, however, may be more than a sample or a specimen of any class. It may be the very archetype or prototype to which the whole class must conform, as when Christ is spoken of as being an example or leaving an example for his disciples. Example comes nearer to the possible freedom of the model than to the necessary exactness of the pattern. Often we can not in a given case exactly imitate the best example, but only adapt its teachings to altered circumstances. In its application to a person or thing, exemplar can scarcely be distinguished from example, but example is most frequently used for an act or course of action for which exemplar is not used; as, one sets a good or a bad example. An exemplification is an illustrative working out in action of a principle or law, without any reference to its being copied or repeated. An example guides an exemplification, illustrates or explains. Ensample is the same as example, but is practically obsolete outside of scriptural or theological language. Compare model, sample. Excess. Synonyms: dissipation, exorbitance, extravagance, intemperance, lavishness, overplus, prodigality, profusion, redundance, redundancy, superabundance, superfluity, surplus, waste, wastefulness. Excess is more than enough of anything, and since this in very many cases indicates a lack either of judgment or of self-control, the word is used frequently in an unfavorable sense. Careless expenditure in excess of income is extravagance. We may also have extravagance of language, professions, etc. As extravagance is excess in outlay, exorbitance is excess in demands, and especially in pecuniary demands upon others. Overplus and superabundance denote in the main a satisfactory, and superfluity an undesirable excess. Lavishness and profusion, a generous, bountiful, or amiable excess, as a profusion of fair hair, lavishness of hospitality. Surplus is neutral, having none of the unfavorable meaning that often attaches to excess. A surplus is that which remains over after all demands are met. Redundance or redundancy refers chiefly to literary style, denoting an excess of words or matter. Excess in the moral sense is expressed by dissipation, prodigality, intemperance, etc. Antonyms: dearth, defect, deficiency, destitution, economy, failure, frugality, inadequacy, insufficiency, lack, need, poverty, scantiness, shortcoming, want. Execute. Synonyms: administer, carry out, do, enforce, perform. To execute is to follow through to the end, put into absolute and final effect in action. To administer is to conduct as one holding a trust, as a minister and not an originator. The sheriff executes a writ; the trustee administers an estate, a charity, etc. To enforce is to put into effect by force, actual or potential. To administer the laws is the province of a court of justice; to execute the laws is the province of a sheriff, marshal, constable, or other executive officer. To administer the law is to declare or apply it. To execute the law is to put it in force. For this enforce is the more general word, execute the more specific. From signifying to superintend officially some application or infliction, administer passes by a natural transition to signify inflict, mete out, dispense, and blows, medicine, etc., are said to be administered, a usage thoroughly established and reputable in spite of pedantic objections. Enforce signifies also to present and urge home by intellectual and moral force, as to enforce a precept or a duty. Compare do, kill, make. Exercise. Synonyms: act, action, activity, application, drill, employment, exertion, occupation, operation, performance, practice, use. Exercise in the ordinary sense is the easy, natural action of any power. Exertion is the putting of any power to strain and tax. An exercise drive for a horse is so much as will develop strength and health, and not appreciably weary. But by qualifying adjectives we may bring exercise up to the full sense of exertion; as, violent exercise. Exercise is action taken at any time with a view to employing, maintaining, or increasing power, or merely for enjoyment. Practice is systematic exercise, with a view to the acquirement of facility and skill in some pursuit. A person takes a walk for exercise, or takes time for practice on the piano. Practice is also used of putting into action and effect what one has learned or holds as a theory; as, the practice of law or medicine. A profession of religion is good, but the practice of it is better. Drill is systematic, rigorous, and commonly enforced practice under a teacher or commander. Compare HABIT. Antonyms: idleness, inaction, inactivity, relaxation, rest. Expense. Synonyms: cost, expenditure, outgo, outlay. The cost of a thing is whatever one surrenders or gives up for it, intentionally or unintentionally or even unconsciously. Expense is what is laid out by calculation or intention. We say, he won his fame at the cost of his life. I know it to my cost. We speak of a joke at another's expense; at another's cost would seem to make it a more serious matter. There is a tendency to use cost of what we pay for a possession, expense of what we pay for a service. We speak of the cost of goods, the expense of making up. Outlay is used of some definite expenditure, as for the purchase of supplies; outgo, of a steady drain or of incidental expenses. See PRICE. Antonyms: gain, income, proceeds, product, profit, profits, receipt, receipts, return, returns. Explicit. Synonym: express. Both explicit and express are opposed to what is merely implicit or implied. That which is explicit is unfolded, so that it may not be obscure, doubtful, or ambiguous; that which is express is uttered or stated so decidedly that it may not be forgotten nor overlooked. An explicit statement is too clear to be misunderstood; an express command is too emphatic to be disregarded. Compare clear. Antonyms: ambiguous, doubtful, implicit, implied, indefinite, indeterminate, uncertain, vague. Extemporaneous. Synonyms: extemporary, extempore, impromptu, improvised, offhand, unpremeditated. Extemporaneous, originally signifying of or from the time or occasion, has come to mean done or made with but little, if any, preparation, and is now chiefly applied to addresses of which the thought has been prepared and only the language and incidental treatment left to the suggestion of the moment, so that an extemporaneous speech is understood to be any one that is not read or recited. Impromptu keeps its original sense, denoting something that springs from the instant. The impromptu utterance is generally brief, direct, and vigorous. The extemporaneous speech may chance to be prosy. Offhand is still more emphatic as to the readiness and freedom of the utterance. Unpremeditated is graver and more formal, denoting absolute want of preparation, but is rather too heavy a word to be applied to such apt, ready utterance as is generally designated by impromptu. Antonyms: elaborated, premeditated, prepared, read, recited, studied, written. Exterminate. Synonyms: annihilate, banish, destroy, eradicate, expel, extirpate, overthrow, remove, root out, uproot, wipe out. Exterminate, from Latin ex out and terminus, a boundary, signified primarily to drive beyond the bounds or limits of a country. The word is applied to races of men or animals, and is now almost exclusively used for removal by death. Individuals are now said to be banished or expelled. Eradicate, from Latin out and radix, root, is primarily applied to numbers or groups of plants which it is desired to remove effectually from the soil. A single tree may be uprooted, but is not said to be eradicated. We labor to eradicate or root out noxious weeds. To extirpate, from Latin ex, out, and stirps, stem, stalk, is not only to destroy the individuals of any race of plants or animals, but the very stock, so that the race can never be restored. We speak of eradicating a disease, of extirpating a cancer, exterminating wild beasts or hostile tribes. We seek to eradicate or extirpate all vices and evils. Compare abolish. Antonyms: augment, beget, breed, build up, cherish, colonize, develop, foster, increase, plant, populate, propagate, replenish, settle. End of section 27. Recording by James O'Connor. Randolph, Massachusetts, December 2009.